Son, I don't know how else to explain it, but you're sick.
Sick? I feel fine. There's nothing wrong with me.
See, that's the problem. You think it's okay to have this disorder, but it's not.
Son, we've brought someone here today to get you back to normal. Pastor Reggie.
How you doing, sir?
All right. This is Justin.
Justin, your parents told me that you said that you were gay. Is that true?
I did. I mean, I am.
Son, you're not gay. You're sick. But thank God I've got the cure.
You're at a restaurant when you overhear an uncomfortable conversation. A set of parents trying to convince their gay son that homosexuality is an illness. They've even brought along their own pastor to pray away the gay. Do you side with the parents, preach the son's right to his own sexuality, or follow the old proverb, silence is golden? What would you do?
I don't understand what's going on.
Don't worry, it's gonna be okay. Let's get started.
Being gay is the only sin, is the only identity acknowledged by the Christian community as being a sin. No other identity is acknowledged as being a sin.
Mr. Novello.
Hello, welcome.
Thank you.
Good to meet you, finally.
Nice to meet you too. Yeah.
How are you?
Yeah, I'm fine.
Been a long trip.
Man. Hello there and welcome to BCPE TV. I am Dennis Mnene, and today we have a visitor by the name of Mr. Novello, if I'm not wrong. So we are going to be talking about a few things, but the main agenda being the LGBTQ. And for that, let me introduce myself first. So I am a media practitioner, and I believe this is the time that I should advocate for the LGBTQ rights, simply because I believe no Kenyan journalist has come out to advocate for these rights. Maybe they are too afraid, maybe they fear the homophobia, that's up to them. But as to me, I have decided that this is a path that I want to venture in. But honestly, let me not talk for much, let Mr. Novello take it from there.
Yes, I'm Reese Novello. I am an LGBT advocate from London in England. I've worked on various projects such as the Pilling Project in the UK, which was the research project to discuss introducing equal marriage for LGBT people in England, which we won in 2014. And I also advocated for LGBT inclusive sex and relationships education in schools, which was missing from the curriculum before 2011, and we won that case as well.
Wow.
I continue to advocate now into my adulthood, and I'm really glad to be speaking about the difficulty for LGBT people to be representative when they exist within the context of different subordinated groups. So, for example, LGBT people who are also black, or LGBT people who are also women, or LGBT people who are also trans, face compounding negative effects in their lives. And we're going to be talking about how to circumvent those and the best way to do it.
Affirmative, nothing to add, nothing to subtract. So heading to that, and I spoke to Olwada Media. I'm sure that I shared the YouTube link to that. And he's black American.
Yes.
Yeah. And he's saying that there in the US, the white LGBTQ community is being favored as compared to the black. So the white LGBTQ community persons have much rights, are being given a much priority as compared to the black LGBTQ. Is it the same case in London, or how is London doing about this?
Yeah, it's definitely true. I think, first of all, we have to acknowledge the fact that when it comes to race relations in the Western world, as much as we have made progress over the last 150 years, we're still very far away from being perfect. The way that black people are still, to this day, institutionally disadvantaged by by the government and by the law enforcement system, it has a compounding effect on those people's ability to be present, to be public and to be vocal on issues which are already quite contentious. So speaking up for gay activism, for example, it already makes one vulnerable to pushback from conservative groups, even as a white person in the Western world. As a black person trying to do that, they face further stigmatization from coming from an already socially disadvantaged group. So in the UK, yes, it's very much the same. In much of Western Europe, in fact.
Okay, affirmative. So, and as we were chatting with you, I think there's a point in which you typed onto me and it read, we can talk about how the accepted face of the LGBT movement has historically been a white one, even though the LGBT community always had black heroes. Can you elaborate much more on that, can we?
Yeah, so I mean, in the UK, for example, we do have recognised LGBT heroes, such as the famed Alan Turing, who was a war hero, a white, gay male war hero. We have a comparison in the US as well in Harvey Milk, who was a public political figure campaigning for LGBT rights in the 1960s. However, the gay community also had an equivalent of Harvey Milk at the same time. They had a politically active black man called Bayard Ruskin, who was a contemporary of Martin Luther King. However, he was a black man, obviously, and he was also gay. And upon being outed as gay, he was disavowed by his black community, and so he was his public profile, his ability to have a public profile, was deplatformed. So therefore, he was no longer able to speak as an advocate for either being a black person or for being a gay person. You might be able to speak more articulately about why this is than I am able to. But from what I understand, the struggles to be acknowledged and empowered as a black man are sometimes considered to be at conflict with the struggles to be empowered and acknowledged as a gay man. I can't really speak as to why, but I have been told that it's because being gay is perceived as being at odds with being strong and black. A necessity to be masculine, to be in charge, to be the head of a family, for example. And how that might have a knock-on effect on that black society's ability to accept a man who is not the archetypal masculine, archetypal traditional sense of strength and community leadership. Because from what I gather, in the black society, the understanding of gay men is that they are not strong, is that they are not masculine, is that they cannot be leaders. Right, and I think that the black community has historically propagated that idea.
Affirmative. Especially here in Kenya, and I think before the interview, we even talked about Kenyan. There's a certain Kenyan aspiring governor in which I don't recall his name. So it was believed that he's gay, but according to the research, they were trying to tarnish his name using the gay vibe. In which, here in Kenya, if you want to become something big and people mention that you're gay, you just lose everything.
Yes. So you see, being gay in a black context, and especially in an African black context, being gay constitutes being disempowered. Right? And that's this adds to a systemic problem where gay people, it is easier to associate the gay activist movement with a white face, because a white face does not have to encounter that form of aggression from, and let's be realistic, from a black community which has historically been brutalized by white supremacist powers, right? So contending with those two struggles simultaneously, I can understand how that might be scary for a lot of gay people, but also how it might be perceived by a still struggling black empowerment movement. It might be perceived as being distracting or weakening to that argument.
Talking of that, and according to the way you're speaking and the points in which you're uttering, this is meaning like the white LGBTQ is highly indeed high, yeah, as compared to the black. So talking of the UK and especially on the media part, do we have any gay journalists who have come up like in the maybe the BBC and like for the CNN we can speak of Anderson Cooper. You know Anderson Cooper?
I do.
He's fully gay and he did do that in public domain. We have Don Lemon. You know Don?
I do.
He did that, but they're still working. They still have an endorsement. Do you have the same thing in the UK?
Yeah, we do. We have Owen Jones in the
Okay.
UK, who is a very prominent political commentator,
Mm-hmm.
and he's also openly gay.
Okay.
And obviously that would influence his political commentary as well.
Yeah,
Right?
affirmative.
And I think that is where the nervousness from the black community in historically disempowered countries such as Kenya, because let's not forget, Kenya's only had independence for 55 to 60 years.
Yeah, sure. Affirmative.
You know, it's young.
Yeah.
As Kenya is still building, but it may be that to encounter the struggle for human rights as it deviates from the central struggle for black human rights, black civil rights in a country like Kenya, it might be one battle too many to be happening at the same time.
Sure.
Okay, so in the UK, for example, we have human rights legislations which protects gay people from being fired for being gay. Like if a person is to be fired for being gay, that is a crime in the UK. It's not allowed.
No.
Now, I know it was only in 2020 that the Kenyan Human Rights Commission confirmed that it is a breach of human rights to forbear the establishment of LGBT charities in Kenya. So LGBT charities are, for only 2 years now, allowed to legally exist as a legal institution, right? However, they did not go as far as to decriminalize being gay itself. So you see, it is incremental. Battles have to be. It is evidenced by history that battles have to be won in increments. They cannot all happen at once.
Yeah,
Short revolution, right? And unfortunately for gay people, we do not have the populist weight to enact a revolution. It's called the tyranny of the majority. So the standard estimation is that gay people or LGBT people as a conglomerate constitute 10% of the world's population. Obviously that would deviate across nations as they have different ways of recognizing what constitutes identity, but also different freedoms to acknowledge it in public as well. So for example, in Kenya, there may be much less than 10% of people who confirm that they are gay or LGBT. It does not mean that there are less than 10%. It just means that there are less than 10% who say that they are. Right? But the problem is that in that case, what we do not have is the weight of majority to defend ourselves in a public arena, in a political and public arena. Okay, and so in Kenya, you will find that the struggle for gay rights is going to be a slow one.
Sure.
Especially in a democratic system, right? So in Ireland, which is a country it's part of the British Isles. Southern Ireland is part of the British Isles. The Northern Ireland is part of the United Kingdom. Southern Ireland had a vote in 2017 for whether or not to implement gay marriage. That vote passed, but it passed by 51%. Okay, it was close to failing. However, it should never have been a public vote to begin with, because you're talking about human rights. And how can 10% of the population be represented by 100% of the population? It doesn't work. Right? Now, again, for black people, that constitutes a compounding effect, because perhaps in Kenya, black people are 97% of the population, but 10% of 97% is still less than 10%, right? So there is a compounding of disadvantage, and that is historically reflected internationally across the world for LGBT activism, right? And for white people, we did not have to face the further disadvantage of being institutionally disempowered because of the color of our skin.
Topic rather which is related to that, the Pope, who is overall leader of the Catholic Church, as you heard, he made remarks that, and he said that the gay and lesbian children, the LGBT children, should be accepted and embraced by their families.
Yes.
And he also welcomed, this LGBT family in the church, though he did limit this and said he does welcome them with love, but not their actions. And I did a certain survey or a certain interview amongst the people, and most people, and the survey was about, should the LGBTQ people welcomed in the church? And most of the Kenyans or most of the Africans said no to this. So what would be your opinion on this? And for instance, you are a priest or you are a pastor right now as you are speaking, you have your church. Would you allow the LGBTQ people to be part of your congregation?
Yeah, so it's a really good question actually, and
Yeah.
it's an important point. As a Catholic person myself, I think it's important to note that the Archbishop of Kenya decried this assertion from the Pope and said that no, gay people should be rejected by the congregation. Now, I read my Bible, I know what it says, and it says quite clearly in the Bible that amongst my flock, the flock of God, there are other sheep, and these other sheep must be loved, and they must be guarded as part of the flock, right? We know that is in the Bible, it cannot be denied. Now, furthermore, being gay is the only sin, is the only identity acknowledged by the Christian community as being a sin. No other identity is acknowledged as being a sin, right? But what I mean by this, being gay is not an act. Being gay is an identity. Why? Because you are gay before you act. How do we know this? Because you act because you are gay.
You act what you are.
You act because you are gay. So the actions of being gay, like intimacy, they follow the gay identity. So one must be gay before they take on gay actions, you see. So it's an oxymoron. Now what that means is it conflicts with itself, okay? Because to sin is to act. To be gay is not to act. So how can a community stigmatize an action that does not exist? How can a community stigmatize an identity? It doesn't work with Christianity because within God's flock there are other sheep. And it says that in the Bible. And let's remember Psalm 139. It says very clearly in Psalm 139, before I formed you in the womb, I knew you in your whole. Okay? Part of my whole is being gay. Okay?
Because you're proud of it.
It's part, exactly so.
Yeah.
So for the Christian community to reject gay members of their community is an oxymoron to the Christian faith and the Christian practice, and you must read your Bible.
Sure. Affirmative. And talking about that, I have realized, according to my own research as a journalist, that in fact most of the gay people are the ones in marriage, simply because people have taken this criteria of being in marriage so as to hide their gay identity. So you might, like in Kenya, only let's take the whole percentage, it's 100%. Only maybe 6 or 7% of the 100% have come out as gay, but the rest are hiding out in marriages. Simply because I've heard of cases, someone is just marrying for their identity, they don't engage into any intimacy act with their wife, simply because they don't feel them. Are you agreeing with this?
I mean, so first of all, we have to remember to forgive the people. Okay, so the man who is scared to come out as gay because he fears brutality and violence. And as a coping mechanism, he marries a woman. That's a survival mechanism. Okay, let's not forget that this person did not choose the context in which they live. If we were able to do that, it would not be illegal to be gay in Kenya. Okay? So we have to remember to forgive the people. Obviously, we must also remember that this is not the ideal situation for anyone involved. Not the gay person themselves who has chosen to marry, to implement themselves into an unhappy circumstance, right? But it's also unfair on the partner that they have married as well, and it's also unfair on the children that they may produce. It is also unfair on their wider family who are denied the opportunity to know their member in whole. Okay, so this practice, it hurts everyone involved.
Yeah.
Absolutely, undeniably it does. But the problem is not the act, the problem is the context in which it exists.
And let me assume that you're in a position to answer this question, which I'm going to ask. So, as the UK knows, and as I know, as you know, as we all know, that LGBT is considered as, as a bad act here in Kenya. Yet in the UK, it's kind of embraced. And UK knows about the LGBT laws in Kenya, that they are considered an issue. Is the UK giving any support, any kind of support to the Kenyan LGBTQ community?
So it's a difficult relationship, right? I do know for a fact that the British Red Cross does make its funds available to LGBT charities in Kenya.
Okay.
I do know that.
Yeah.
However, we have to remember our history, and the history is that the Kenyan constitution, as it exists today, was predicated on a colonial institution that was brought to Kenya. The anti-LGBT laws, as they exist in the modern and the current Kenyan constitution, were British anti-LGBT laws. Okay, so therein is an irony, because British people, British gay people in the UK experience a lot of freedom and a lot of hard-won civil rights. Okay, we did have to fight for those civil rights. Being gay was decriminalised in the UK in 1964. Okay, so that was 57 years ago. It wasn't long ago. It wasn't a long time ago. My mum was born before that, so it wasn't long ago. But the irony is that we dismantled that law in the UK, but the law wasn't dismantled because we also transitioned it over to Kenya. So that anti-LGBT law does still exist. That British anti-LGBT law does still exist because it still exists in Kenya. We left it behind. So a really good example of the struggle to cross-represent can be seen in literature. So in the UK, we had a fantastic gay white writer called Oscar Wilde. Now, he is acknowledged as being a gay writer. Okay. The black community had a fantastic gay writer called James Baldwin, who wrote beautiful literature. He is remembered as a black writer, not as a gay writer, and more importantly, not as a black gay writer. So this shows how we struggle to cross-represent, okay? Because the fact is, James Baldwin, he wrote LGBT love stories, gay love stories, okay? But because he is black, he cannot be acknowledged as a gay writer, because that is perceived to be in conflict with the struggle for black civil rights. So he's remembered as a black writer. Whereas Oscar Wilde did not experience this. He's allowed to be a white writer, a white gay writer, because to be white is not already a struggle.
So he used to write literature books about gay.
Yes, James Baldwin he wrote a fantastic, beautiful love story called Giovanni's Room.
Giovanni's Room, I'm going to look for that.
It's a beautiful love story, and it's set in the 1940s in Paris. James Baldwin went to Paris, so in this time. So it's widely believed that what he was writing was his own experience, okay? But his experience is marginalized to being the experience of a black man in Europe. He cannot be remembered as a gay black man in Europe because he has to represent the black community, right?
Yeah.
Not fairly, like he should be able to be intersectional. He should be allowed to cross-represent as both being black and gay. But he's not able to because of the struggles that the black community has already faced.